Hello and welcome back to the Mixing Music Podcast. I'm your host. Today, Lou is not here with me for this episode, but I've been trying to figure out ways that I want to episode, like if I were to myself. The reason why we having Lou on the show is because of the pushback that. So I'm gonna work hard on this episode. Go back and forth or build per. I have a list of 8 things, pretty fleshed out. Like a list. Hold on one second. A list of 8 reasons why. Back to start over. In long saucy audio over. Hello and welcome back to the Mixing Podcast. I'm your host DK, and today Lou is not here, but I have a really good episode planned. This episode is a list of 8 things, 8 myths industry that we want to kind of dissolve. We dive in, talk about the nuances a little bit. I have some data points as well that might be interesting, might not be interesting. Coming in from a business perspective, I have some examples of people that are doing this well. Even some philosophical points that might be validating or valid for each point there, each bullet point. I have a list of 8 bullet points of myths that, and maybe we'll add a few more. We'll go on tangents and stuff. I'm just going to kind of riff off of all these points. All right. So number 1, just getting straight into it, this is kind of a dumb one. And in the sense that it's spoken about a lot. People still struggle with this internally. There's a lot of FOMO. There's a lot of fear about it for some reason. But the first example is you need expensive gear to sound professional. And obviously that's not right. You don't need expensive gear to sound professional. I mean, one of the clearest examples is Billie Eilish, right? And this goes on to the sense of like, we can go into an entire tangent and conversation of like, what is high quality music, and what is high quality, like how related is high quality music to success of that song or success of a record. But that's not something that we're going to talk about right now. I think decades before, gear to make the music at a baseline level was inaccessible, significantly more inaccessible. And I think to say that in 2024, even the last decade, that even the last 2 decades, the equipment you need to at least make baseline acceptable audio and music and productions, both digitally, whatever, or analog, is very accessible. And you can find a place. There's lots of community built-in things as well. A lot of cities, they have a library where they have like a podcast or like a studio. A lot of schools obviously do, both public school, high school, middle school, as well as obviously public and private higher level education. Colleges have great recording studio. You have a friend or a neighbor that probably has some sort of basic insight into audio production and music. It's significantly more accessible, especially like with YouTube and kind of the free information on the web. Although it can get mucky, I think it's very plain to see now that you don't need expensive gear to sound professional. What professional sounds like is another conversation that I don't want to get into. A great that right now that I think I did an episode about that a few months ago, maybe a little bit more, maybe about a year ago. Great example of this is Grammy-winning engineer Vance Powell, working with Chris Stapleton, Jack White. He's always emphasized that skill and creativity are far more important than having expensive equipment. Now, the reason why those sort of anecdotal examples don't work very well is because these companies, I don't know which. There's so many variables that make this equation, right? Of why people are feeling insecure, feeling FOMO about not having specific gear or software. One of the variables that I think is very prevalent or is a foundational issue is the effort of the marketing teams for each. It's just capitalism in general, and I don't think it's necessarily a terrible thing, but I will admit that one of the side effects to that is these marketing people in these companies that are trying to make money off of you, trying to profit off of you. One of the selling points is to help you feel more secure and trust your own process, or at least make the process more fun, or in some case. And the fact of the matter is, with anything creative, I do not think objective quality, for example, like 48 kilohertz versus something on a tape machine in the 80s, or like a cassette tape recorded in the 80s. I don't think the actual sound itself necessarily is a make or break point in most cases for a record, right? And just like that example, like with Vance Powell, and so many other prevalent examples now. I mean, the main one is like Billie Eilish, right? With her brother in a bedroom with cheap, not super cheap, but like with relatively affordable prosumer grade equipment. This just pure focus and relentless ambition for authentic portrayal of music and tone. I think that's significantly more important to sound professional, whatever it means to sound professional. And I think this goes along outside of music as well. I love talking about, I identify as a business person first, an entrepreneur first, before I identify as just a mix engineer, although that's very important. So I love to talk about how these relate to general business. Alex Hormozy is famous for talking about how people often overemphasize the tools and underemphasize execution. He's like, often he talks about how, dude, it's not just about how you do things. We could talk about how you do things all the time, but you have to just do them. It's about the execution of the thing. It's not just about, if we just call people. No, you'd have to do the calling eventually, right? In business and in sales, in his case. And that echoes in music production, where foundational skills is what ultimately matters, right? Even in Eastern philosophy, Zen teaching, stress simplicity and deep understanding, mastering basic tools rather than chasing the most expensive, aligns with the Zen belief of working with what you have to achieve mastery. I think that goes beyond like what we have and what we're born with as well. Like, think there's something really deep and important about. I really think the best music and the best creative endeavors comes from a very extremely authentic, purely authentic place. The messaging, the words, even if it is accessible by the layman, it has to come from a real place. And I think one of the killers of music, as in bad thing, one of the things that makes music bad is this sensation or feeling of try hard or wanting to be accepted. This like almost ego that can't. It's strange. It's not. It's something that we all sense, but it's difficult to describe how we feel it. So if you can figure out a way to accept yourself and understand, be okay with the tools that you were given, with the talent that you were given, with the experiences that you've had, the decisions that you made, and be able to move along with that, I think that makes for a better sound. Like, genuinely, sincerely. So you need expensive gear to sound professional. I know that that's like a really dumb, low-hanging fruit point. We all know that. But I don't think I can properly emphasize how much that's true. I find it very interesting, especially us Americans here, that are burdened with consumerism, like maxing consumerism, right? the psychological downside of that is a feeling of need to do this, that I cannot be authentic, I cannot do what I need to do without it. But I really think that if your personal authentic desire is aligned with what you are trying to do, I think those will naturally not become important. It's like being a child. Like, a child doesn't care, like they want to just build something with their Legos. They're not caring about, they don't even think about having specific Lego pieces until eventually they learn that they start building an expectation to build something. And then once they have an expectation to build something, then they're frustrated that they don't have the right pieces. But when you're like a child and you're just kind of building as you go, and you're just seeing where your heart takes you, there's no expectation, which I think is a beautiful foundation, and a place where pure authenticity and childlike spontaneity can grow, which I think is such a beautiful and important human part of understanding, one that either is born out of naivety or learned after understanding a fair amount of true and obvious cynicism in the world. You have to go back and learn this childlike naivety, I like to say spontaneity, and kind of like get back with yourself. So I think that's significantly more important. There's like I asked ChatGPT for like survey points and stuff, and there's a dumb survey point that said, conducted by Sweetwater in 2021, found that 70% of professional audio engineers achieve commercial level quality using a mix of affordable gear and stock plugins. That's a dumb survey point. I'm not gonna lie to you. 2, success is all about your technical skills. Let me fight this one a little bit, actually. Success is all about your technical skills. Obviously not. I repeat this often, but I think there is a graph that across the board, I think this goes beyond just music as well. But I think there's a relative graph. Like at the beginning, you don't know what's going on, you're naive, you actually think you're better than you are. This is more like Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Where cognitive bias, where it's like you think you're really good, you don't realize how bad you actually are, you don't know what an EQ does, and it doesn't important because you're just having so much fun just playing with GarageBand or whatever DAW that you got, FL Studio, and then you like start digging into YouTube. And then you're like, oh crap, I don't know how compressors work. I'm like starting to realize that frequency masking is a big deal. And then you start overthinking everything because you don't know how any of the tools work, and you don't understand what compression sounds like, and you don't understand how to properly utilize panning and reverbs and EQ and saturation to better. You don't understand how these contribute to the emotional enhancement or creation of a song. And then after a while, once you start learning how these tools work, you kind of get out of this valley of technicality, right? This huge slump of while you're learning how these tools work, and you start to build back up to where you originally were, that level of emotional intelligence and connection that you had at the very beginning. But this time you have the skills to back it up, and you start building back up again, and then you realize that the answer all along was just using your ears and becoming emotionally in tune with the songs that you're working on. And so you kind of like leave this valley of technicality and kind of go back into this moment of growth and emotional connection. Same thing with like jazzers, right? When you hear a lot of like jazz musicians say that like, oh, it's like a conversation on stage when we're improvising and trading fours, trading eights, or whatever they're doing, right? It's a conversation. We're talking to each other. We're building chords together. And that conversation, that musical conversation, really only happens if everybody's fully fucking locked in to the scales, to the notes, to the chords. They know what's going on from a very deep technical perspective. And once that technical thing is so practiced, so well practiced, and so well understood that they no longer have to think about it consciously, is when the conversations start happening. And that's when true masterpieces of improvisation are used. And the cool thing about jazz, using that as an example, is that everybody steals licks and phrases from everybody else. Not only do they build in their own phrases, licks, or intervals, or whatever they want to use, they also heavily, unashamedly use influences from others. And there's actually some phrases and some licks that are so often borrowed that among jazzers become memes. So I think that that's an important thing. With mixing, it's the same thing. Many people right now that are listening to the podcast that think that technical information is what's going to make them better, and I think that there's some truth to that. I think coming from naivety and going through the valley of technicality is a necessary step. I think there is a proper order. Like you need to learn the rules in order to break them. Not worrying about the rules is ignorant. You have to learn the rules to break them. And then once you learn the rules, breaking them becomes also significantly more meaningful. And you can do those with a lot more purpose, which I think translates to significantly more emotional transference, because things are significantly more intentional. Like even with the music, like there's some things that songwriters do. Like I watched a video of someone breaking down a song from Moana, and it blew my mind because he's like, listen to this note, see how it goes to the relative minor key for just this note. And this is when the songwriter wrote that the lead singer or the main character feels like they're outsiders, that they feel like they've changed, and then they change the key. And it's these like ridiculous things, or like with Mozart, with classical music, like you have no idea as a listener, as a watcher, like, was this done intentionally? Because if it was, that is actually insane. Or is this something that we kind of worship and honor in retrospect? Like it was like an accident, but that kind of made sense afterwards. And I think when you get past this valley of technicality, I think that's when real art can be made, where you can actually purposefully make these connections that other people are like cannot fathom, right? It's so incredibly thoughtful that there's no way people were doing this while it was writing. It's only grand in retrospect, and I don't think that's the case for most of these art forms. Like I think you need to learn the technical in order to speak emotionally. So this is the thing. So success is all about your technical skill? Absolutely not. I mean, an audio example of this is like my mentor, one of my major mentors, one of the first people of major status among the music industry, Leslie Brathwaite, who I speak so highly of, who I genuinely think not only is one of the greatest engineers, but backs it up by being one of the greatest people ever. Watching him mix with the masters when they invited him on the first time. And when they invited him on the first time, I actually went to France, went to the 1 week long seminar, and Leslie Brathwaite was like, I talked to some of the owners, and they're like, how was this in comparison to the others? And they just had like Andrew Sheps, I think the week or two before that. And they said it was, in contrast, it was completely wild to see someone like Andrew really show the complicated process Andrew Sheps is all about parallel processing and adding buses and making the process complicated for the purpose of making it better, right? Obviously. But like really complicated processing. And then here comes Leslie, who so underwhelmingly keeps it simple that it was almost dishonoring Andrew Sheps' point. I find that super interesting. Like he makes it so accessible. Leslie makes it so accessible and easy to understand that there is no denying that it's straight up just the ear and the understanding. It's not about some secret knowledge. It's not about a secret plugin or a string of plugins. It's not about a chain. It's so simple that it's almost disrespectful to the craft. Obviously, it's not, and I don't think it is. For me, at that time when I went to mix with the masters, that was like the most mentally healthy eye-opening thing that I needed, because I was so in my head and felt so insecure about my mixing, about my audio engineering, especially at the time I wasn't in a major music city, and it was just scary to be there. Right? It was just scary to be there in his presence and among the presence of other great engineers that were invited to that seminar. And this guy, he's always Leslie's always talking about how technical ability isn't enough in the music industry. That's almost like baseline. It's after that, it's relationship building, soft skills, empathy, and man, does the guy have the ability to empathize, the ability to work with you, a lot of emotional intelligence. He really cares about things that are important. I do find, I don't know if I really want to share this. This is just something that stands out to me on a personal, individual level. I don't think this is true across the board, so I'm going to overgeneralize here a little bit, but I wonder if there's some truth to this. I'm kind of exploring this thought here. I think it is very obvious and easy to see among, and we're going to keep this among the top 1%ers, right? And I say this more of like a matter of fact, not as a brag. I'm also in the top 1%. According to Muso.ai, I'm in the top 1% of mix engineers, along with 1% of mastering engineers, based on credits and however they collect their data. I think it's like streams, so it's not just how big the songs were, and the entire lifetime, but it's more like how big your repertoire and your playlist, your work is at the current moment. Right. So I'm a top 1%, and I think that I go to a lot of events and see a lot of these other audio engineers that are also top 1%ers and then top 0.1%ers as well, right? And you see this, and I think it's pretty obvious among the top 1%ers of those that are there under personal stress. Like, for example, they're really competitive. They're constantly comparing themselves to others. They're like kind of like hamsters, just like nervous people. Very nervous, just never feeling like they're enough. And then there are those that I think stand out that have been able to work through that. I don't think anybody is actually immune to those feelings, but I think the ones that have worked on it, working on themselves, and are looking to move past that, to find a balance with a level of contentment, with a level of desire for more, there is a personal difference. And I think the ones that, in my opinion, and this is very biased, but I think that the ones that have learned or are learning to love themselves and to kind of like move beyond just sincere, deep self-hatred, and personified through comparison, they do better long term. The ones that are hyper competitive have short bursts of really amazing work, but I think in order to do well in the long term, I think you have to figure yourself out. And I think once you figure yourself out and you accept yourself, I think it's easier to accept your lack of technical skill, or easy to accept that you're finally at a point that you do have enough technical skill and that you kind of, you're already winning by having a career or by doing enough. And then everything that you do is just bonus points. And when you get to that stage, you're also a lot easier to work with. You're a lot more, typically the side effects of that is you become a lot more reliable, easy to work with, I already said, fun to hang out with. It's easier to communicate with. These are all things that honestly A&R, label reps, and even artists, bands, other studios, whatever level you're working on, these are the soft skills that I think are more important than technical skills. Okay, sorry, moving on. I'm ranting a little bit, but this is a solo episode. That's my job. In the book Linchpin, Seth Godin explains that while technical skills can get you noticed, it's emotional intelligence and the ability to connect with others that help you stand out. Obviously, in psychology, and this is from the book Emotional Intelligence by Goleman, he says that emotional intelligence, EQ, has a stronger correlation with success than IQ. I will say monetary success. Studies show that EQ has a correlation coefficient of 0.29 with income, while IQ has a lower coefficient of 0.23. Higher EQ traits such as empathy and agreeableness are linked to higher incomes and stronger career trajectories. On top of that, with the big five, being assertive, being a people pleaser, which is very human and very natural. It is something that we all learn as a human defense mechanism from our parents, from our friends growing up, in order to be accepted by the in group of whatever that means, the cool kids, the normal kids, not to be bullied, right? Not to be, and in some severe cases, to not be hit by your parents, right? We all learn to people please. This is not your desire for people pleasing does not make you special or weird. That is very normal. Everybody has it. Most people, not everybody, most people have it. And I think that it's fair to say that everybody who learns to get over it, it does take effort. It is a cognitive, conscious effort. Oh my goodness, someone's outside mowing the lawn or something like that. I apologize if you hear that in the audio. But it is a conscious and important effort that is made by people. It's not something that people are like necessarily born with. Although I think some people by personality have less of that defense mechanism. But I don't want to say that people are born with it. I think that it's something that is learned. I'm a great example of somebody that's learned. I'm actually very high in agreeableness and not assertive. And I kind of, with myself, with YouTube, went through the conscious practice of assertiveness training to help become less agreeable, because agreeableness is actually significantly more correlated to higher levels of income than intelligence, extroversion even. So yes, learning to speak up for yourself, and learning to be emotionally intelligent. We've all learned about this, but that being said, I think we're going to get to another section which is going to talk about this, where like talent. On the last million download episode, Shane Lance said, talent is like baseline, of course. If you have it or you don't, and if you do have it, you're probably here. If you don't have it, like it's not even part of the conversation because it's a given. Everybody and their dog is talented or can be talented in different things. And even, here's the thing too, it's like, even if you kind of suck and you make outsider music, which is the genre of music that is made, that is not very good, famously not very good, is super interesting and has a cult following in itself. So take that for what you want. Let's see here. According to a study by TalentSmart, EQ accounts for 67% of the abilities needed for a superior job performance across industries. Wow, that was a really lame data point. Thanks, ChatGPT. Mixing with plugins is inferior to analog gear. Come on, do I even need to say this? This is, I'm finding, from personal observation, I'm finding that actually the one part of the industry which we would have guessed would never move away from analog gear, which is mastering engineers, which is interesting because with recording technology, having outboard gear going into a console, going into a computer is practical. I mean, I know you have real-time compression that you can print and bake into audio tracks, but there's still something about having outboard gear which can be practical for recording. With mixing and mastering, it's not so necessary from a practical perspective. But mastering has always been an outlier in the sense that has always been very proud in their need and use of analog gear. Oftentimes, the marketing for a lot of mastering engineers is like, if you're entirely in the box, at least this process should be, if you're completely in the box, at least this process should go out of the box, like have a little bit of tube warmth on the way out, or some sort of like tape saturation on the way out, some real analog saturation. And we're actually finding, especially in LA, which is obviously the capital of music entertainment in the entire world, not just the US, in the entire world, we're seeing a huge shift of mastering engineers, the famously prideful group of engineers about analog gear, move from analog to digital. And there are many mastering engineers that are unashamedly, like, will tell you that they are. It used to be taboo. It used to say that if you were working in the box as a mastering engineer, you'd immediately be placed as other, an outsider. But in this case, people are unashamedly starting to admit, like, yes, in the box is significantly more efficient with recalls. It's significantly more precise and allows us to get the tones that we want faster and more quickly and more precisely. Because there is a level of randomness with analog gear, with real gear, that I think is actually really practical and beautiful. but there's also a level of preciseness that comes from digital tool. And I think there's also something to say that the randomization is often now, especially with plugins like anything made by Plugin Alliance, a lot of these plugins have randomization within their coding to help with that feeling of analog. I actually think it's modeled very, very well. A lot of this stuff is getting significantly better at modeling. And even I bought Unfairchild, powered by Mixlan and Kive, Eddie, who coded the stuff, Jesse, who's kind of like publishing. I don't know what's going on. I don't know exactly what Mixlan's role is in that. And then Eric Valentine with the Unfairchild. This plugin is amazing. If you look at the Plugin Doctor, and if you look at and you listen to it, the saturation is constantly modulating based on the input and the signal that it's coming in, based on, like, it literally, the saturation modulates and changes based on how much the threshold even, and the attack and release times. It's not randomized, but it modulates so much and changes so much with each little movement that it's like kind of a random box in a very analog way. It's sincerely, the coding on that is so insane and convoluted that I don't know, I think that that's like a great example of digital emulating analog in such a beautiful way. And then it's almost superior because Eddie built the plugin to all it does. It's flat, like sonically it's flat all the way through except for a little high pass filter towards 20 hertz, right? But the only thing, if you hear more mid-range or if you hear more top end, that's straight saturation. And that's straight saturation based on the modulating saturation that's happening right now in that moment based on the position that you give it. So it's like you really have to use your ear. It's really subtle. Absolutely beautiful. Tim Ferriss in The 4 Hour Workweek, which is one of my favorite books. I actually built a business off of one of the concepts in 4 Hour Workweek with my buddy Johnny Dinkle. Launchpad Media helped start with this podcast. And he always talks about efficiency over complexity. Now, there are use cases of complexity being very, very important and useful, especially for advancing different things. But for us service providers, not all of us... What do I want to say here? I'm gonna hold my tongue on that, actually. But Tim Ferriss always emphasizes using fewer tools to get the job done, which aligns with the idea that in-the-box mixing can offer efficiency without compromising quality. And that's the thing too. Again, that FOMO thing. People feel like if they don't go out of the box, then they're missing out on something. I'm going to tell you right now, like most of the top 1%ers, 0.1 percenters are majority in the box. And if they go out of the box, it's only for part 1 or 2 tools, and they don't even use it all the time. I'm telling you, and a lot of people are moving. And this is not me. There's no agenda for this. My agenda is personal empowerment and taking back creativity. I'm sick and tired of, and this goes beyond music, I have a personal vendetta with, I like capitalism in general, but with creativity, you can't, it's with creative endeavors, not all safe moves are good. In fact, very few financially safe and secure creative endeavors very few of those are actually contributing to world perspectives and change and progression, human progression. I don't think you have to take risks. This is like with creative endeavors, with movie, film, TV, writing, you have to do things that, like, the weirdo should win. Weirdos should win 100% of the time. And I think, I don't think that it's the system that is not allowing weirdos to win in most cases. I think on a lot of cases, I think weirdos are denying themselves from being authentic, because they see the machine working and they see that, they're only funding the ones that are not weird, the ones that are actually popular. And then they're like, that must mean that weirdos, they limit themselves. I refuse to blame the system and give power to the system in that sense. I do think that if people were more unashamedly authentic, I think that leads to better art. I mean, even with the idea of like Shogun as as an American writing show. 19 Emmys, I think. It was so well written, but the concept and the themes were so outside of the scope of traditional American writing and media that, from a business perspective, was kind of dumb to invest in. It was very different from, like, the archetypes were not traditional, very creative, very different from what's out there right now. And yet they spent a ton of money and made it beautiful and made it execute. And I think it's because the weirdo had vision. The weirdos, and in this case, the Japanese people as well, contributed, were unashamedly proud of this vision, and it was very clear. And I think that clarity of vision led to the transference of passion from the weirdo to the businessman, which led them to create something weird and beautiful and historical. So I think if you embrace the weird and authentic in you, you can enlighten others. One of my favorite quotes is, the transference of passion from being around passionate people is enlightenment. And I think that creatives underestimate their power to enlighten others by becoming insecure. I think creatives becoming insecure is the most, I think it's like one of the worst things for creativity in general. I think this is a very human issue, and everybody struggles with insecurity. And I think that that's something that's going to happen the entire time. But I think as creatives, our job is to work on that. Like, we have to accept ourselves at some point. And however you get there, whether that's Zazen meditation, whether that's whatever your religion is, whether that's cleaning your conscience in other ways, getting rid of alcohol, whether that's getting married and settling down, having kids, or whether that's getting a dog. I don't having a girlfriend or getting rid of a girlfriend or boyfriend. However, whatever it takes to make the decisions to clear your mind, whether that's traditional or not traditional, I don't give a shit. Clear your conscience, and I think that will open up and empower everyone to make better changes within the creative world. I really hate, for example, like, I'm going to say it out loud, like, Disney's writing direction is infamous at this point. But it's very easy to see why it got there. It's very practical. All right, number 4, taking every gig will build your career faster. Ooh, this is really important, actually. Alex Hormozi, what was the quote? I'm forgetting this quote. Alex Hormozi, the business guy, he says that in order to get to the $100 million business deal, you have to say no to the $50 million business deal. And I think there's a lot of nuance to this. Because one perspective is, I do think that people oftentimes, create boundaries too quickly. And oftentimes people do create boundaries too quickly. I don't know if it's boundaries as much as a lack of focus and desire. And then there are people that don't have enough boundaries, that like don't know how to say no to things. So I think there's nuance to this. There's perspectives on both sides. But if you're the type of person that is really on top of your shit, like Bob Horn, who we talked about multiple times, he was on top of his shit. He would bend over backwards for these clients. And he would do everything very efficiently, respond to emails timely, do everything on time, quickly, faster than everybody else. And he was loved for that. And then he decided that I need boundaries. I need to say no. And then the other person, I think this is significantly more common among the people that are not in the top 1%, is that there's the PR of the music industry and creative professionals in general. The PR is horrible. If you do music, the assumption is everybody in LA and everybody that does music always ghosts you, never gets done in time, it always takes a month to bounce stems. Why is that the standard perspective? That is so dumb. And that should go to show that, like, to stand out, all it takes is just a little bit of self-control, impulse control, and a little bit of, like, strategic responsibility, honestly. I really do think that Okay, so I think most people that are creative should take more responsibility and should get to the baseline level of responding to emails 100% of the time, even if the email is I can't get to this right now, or even if the email is being assertive and saying I don't want to do this, but in a kind way, right? People, once you get to that, most people are not at that baseline level. If you're not at that baseline level of being really not just kind of reliable, but really fucking reliable. If you're not at that level, then you need to get to that level to even compete. You're not going to compete. You're never going to work with people unless you're at that level for years, right? I'm not even gonna, I'm kind of hating on the people. You're making real professionals, anybody that is unable to do that is unable to actually get to meetings on time, that plan their own meetings and then don't even show up to their own meetings on time, that are incapable of having a to-do list and balance clients and complain about clients and complain about workloads and stuff, that are unable to do all this stuff. You're making the rest of us working hard look bad. You're making the music industry look bad. Stop doing that. You need to lower. If you really want to do this as a career, you need to remove your boundaries. It's not fucking boundaries in mental health. You're a lazy fuck. And you need to figure that shit out. And being a lazy fuck is not necessarily you as a human being. This is me telling you probably, music is not your thing, which is valid and okay. Because if you start doing graphic design or coding, or like going back to school, you may not be a lazy fuck, right? So like laziness and your inability to get over this idea of like mental health, which I'm a huge proponent of mental health. That is one of the major things that I talk about. But this is one of the few examples where I'm like, dude, fuck your mental health. You're a lazy fuck, which means that this probably isn't for you. Because I don't think people are naturally native fucks. I think people just haven't found the thing that they really, really love, that they don't realize they're working hard for, because it's so like, they're like children again, because it's exciting and there's real passion behind it. People think that they're passionate about music, and then they start getting into the business and they're overthinking everything, and they're like not responding to emails, and they're ghosting people, and they're incapable. Their pride is not allowing them to see that this may not be for you. And that's okay. There's nobody in this world that's like, if you don't like music, you're a piece of shit. There's nobody that's doing that. You're doing that. Only you are doing that. Nobody is doing that. That is insane. You're not being held at gunpoint. Find something that you love and contribute to society in a way that's healthier for you. But if you really, really do want to do music, and if this aligns with you, then you need to figure out a path within music, whether that's A&R, whether that's management, whether that's mixing, whether that's recording, whether that's being an artist, whether that's writing, whether that's running live sound, helping out with venues as a security person. There's so many, or doing dialogue for movies, film, videos, video games, right? Whatever it is, there's so many different paths. You have to find the one where becoming reliable is natural to you. I'm going to say that again. Becoming reliable must become natural to you. When desire lines up with your passion, when the thing that you do aligns with your desire and passion, lowering your boundaries and becoming reliable is no issue. It's not an issue. It's very natural. And then once you get to that point, then the conversation can become, okay, we need boundaries though. But I don't think that's a majority of people. I think the majority of people in the music industry, based off of the PR that we have, of the people at the bottom feeders that are making everybody look bad in the music industry, that's making the people saying that the music industry is a bunch of cheaters and scammers, that's not the top 1%ers. I'm telling you right now, that is the bottom feeders. That is the ones that are doing the most amount of work across the board for the least amount of money. And it's you're making the top look bad. You're honestly maybe part of the contributing problem of people calling the music industry like, oh, dude, it triggers me when people are like, this is a very evil and corrupt industry. And I think there is some parasitic things going on. But dude, it is so fucking disrespectful to people like me and anybody else that actually loves what we do for music when you say that the music industry is a bunch of Satanists and a bunch of like people that hate humans and are evil. No, there are some parasitic people, but those are very few and far between. It's so like it's the same logic of like people have already figured out cancer. People have already figured out cancer, but because the majority of people are parasitic and want to make money off of you, they haven't shared how to fix cancer yet. That is so disrespectful to the actual working people that are trying to find the cure for cancer. These people have lost family members because of cancer. They're probably related to. They've been educated as much as they possibly can, and they're seeking to further go beyond current human understanding to find different solutions to this huge problem. And when you say that it's part of a system, that may be in part true. There are some few people that are undoubtedly parasitic, but to say that the vast majority is so fucking disrespectful. So disrespectful. And on top of that, I think that disrespect cycles back and comes back to you, because when you start doing music, then you, with this expectation that it is bad, I'm doing something bad, is only going to hurt your desire, because then you're going to be like, oh, maybe I'm doing something bad. You're going to question yourself. And that judgment is only going to hurt you. It comes back around. Don't do that. Don't waste your energy on that. I'm done. Sorry. That's like a really big topic for me. I got really fucking triggered there. Sorry about that, y'all. But I think that's like really important. Really important. I think that's like very true. Okay. Taking every gig obviously leads to burnout, which leads to lower quality work. Atomic Habit, James Clear stresses the importance of focusing on your energy on a few key actions. Saying yes to everything spreads your energy too thin, while focusing on intentional work builds a sustainable career. Another thing, I think it's a James Clear quote where he says, it's not above average effort, it's average effort over an above average period of time. I love that. All right. And I think there is a balance. This is very like Buddhist and Taoist in the sense like yin yang, right? Like, this is very much, it's not about overworking. It's not about boundary. It's not, at the end of the day, it's not just about boundaries or lack of. It's not about taking on work and avoiding burnout. It's about the balance, finding the balance between listening to your conscience, being real with yourself, removing that ego, like kind of try to observe yourself. Like there's a streamer out there who suggested, if you were somebody else and you were to give them advice, what would you say? Like, try to put yourself in third person there. Like, look at yourself at third person consciously and then give yourself advice. Because if you look in the mirror and try to give yourself advice from first person, it's significantly different. But look at yourself from third person. If you yourself was having issues and if you were to hear your own problems to yourself, what advice would you give? Especially as men, where we're like always trying to problem solve, sometimes in a toxic way. That perspective I find helps me, and sometimes that's like kind of the point of like meditation as well. But that's actually some useful advice. I think that's actually really practical. Figure it out. You could do it. If you don't want to do that, or if you're incapable of doing that, take shrooms. That'll get you to look at yourself in a different light. Okay, let's see. This is from Journal of Applied Psychology. A study published in the Journal of Applied Psychology found that overworking leads to a 40% drop in productivity once the 50-hour work week mark is exceeded, reinforcing the idea that working smarter, not harder, leads to better outcomes. I feel like those are like so obvious. Number 5, we're getting through this episode. Number 5, you have to be based in major music cities. So I actually disagree with this one. This is the one that I think is true to a certain degree. And I have a lot of bias, and you may be thinking, well, that's because you took the risk. You want to validate the risk that you took to move to LA, DK. Yeah, I have to agree with you. That is a bias that I have, for sure. I won't disagree with that. But I do think that the data is consistent. With recorded music, the majority of labels, the funding, where these budgets are going, they're not going to Pennsylvania. They're not going to Wisconsin. They're staying in LA. And I think part of that as well is very practical. When you work in an industry that is very creative, that is not objectively better, like with in the tech world, you can gather data that says this function in the Apple is making us more money than this thing in Apple. And Apple can pull data together and say, they can cross-check and do analysis, and like, this product makes more money than this product because of this reasons and this demographic and these things that are needed and valued by the current American or whatever Chinese person or whatever data that they're collecting, right, in the demographic. With music, it's so personal and subjective that they're not going to be able to find that analysis to that degree. There's as much. That's why like these marketing companies within music that are able to create groundbreaking new ways of collecting data is such a big deal, because there's so little data that's actually practical and worthwhile. So if you can figure out some technical way to gather data in some analytics for creatives like music, that'll make you a shit ton of money, and that's worth a lot of money, right? Anyway, when things are so subjective and so personal, how do you find the people to take on larger budgets? You have this grandiose, huge vision, this straight, clear vision, and it might be crazy to most people, especially because it's a creative endeavor. It will be crazy to most people. If I'm a label and I want to invest money in an idea that's never been done before, that is very creative, that sounds insane to me, because I myself, as an executive, am probably not as creative as the artist and the producers involved, right? I'm like, this is kind of crazy. This has never been done before. There's no data that indicates that mixing hip hop with country, like Lil Nas X did years ago, is going to do well. Why would I invest so much money in the marketing of this? You know how those decisions are made? How the budgets are spent? It's literally most of the time spent on nepotism. We all know that. We always say that the music industry is who you know. So I think it's two things. I think it's a clarity of vision. So like being delusionally confident in your craft, accepting your weirdness, and then that transference of passion, being around the passionate people is enlightenment. I think that's that. Being like delusional and absolutely clear with your vision and direction and your desire. Just completely aligned with what you know, what you want, and unapologetically so. I think that's really important. And then I think the second thing is just practical nepotism. Nepotism can be used incorrectly. It can be pretty bad. Obviously, parasitic and stuff kind of keeps the money within the family. But I don't think people realize how practical that is in a subjective economic environment like music. When there's no objectively better, we have data based on this. There's no data on combining hip hop with country music for Lil Nas X, right? When you have this, it's going to be like, who do you know that you trust, that you're willing to put your personal name on the line for that person? It becomes the most, there are very few better systems than that are as efficient. Because you can't just like, there's no research that you can do that says like, okay, this guy out of Minnesota is doing a super good job and can do this because he's been doing this for years. Like that doesn't really happen like that. It's going to end up as, who do you know and who do you trust, and who are you willing to put your name on the line for? Because if you put your name on the line for someone and they underperform, don't perform, then you can potentially get blacklisted, right? And nobody wants that. So they're very careful with who they endorse, who they recommend, extremely careful, and they're going to go based off of personal experience. Nobody's ever combined, well, hip hop and pop and country like that in a big way, but who do you know that has experience that could align with that? Who is the least riskiest person based on who you know, based on their work ethic, based on their emotional intelligence, based off of your experience working with them? Who do you recommend? Like, it's so practical and efficient that I doubt that we will find a better solution for that. So yes, it's who you can know, but it's not meant to be parasitic. People give it a hard time and like are very pessimistic about it. No, it's very practical. I do think so. To this point, I think number 5 was supposed to be a myth. You have to be based in a major music cities to succeed. To succeed is this is going to be semantics there, but I think to do very well in the top 1% and above, right? You have to be in major music cities. I think that, but I think success doesn't have to be defined by a certain level of income. And I think a certain level of income can be achieved outside of the major music cities, but it's not through traditional means. For example, I think that you can make 6 figures as a musician, but probably not from audio engineering, producing, and mixing more the traditional route. It's probably going to be from teaching and scaling your teaching through digital lessons. It might be through some sort of marketing or working with brands. It might be working as a consultant for those that are in major music cities. It's going to be some sort of alternative route and not traditional route. So I think it is possible, but I think it's actually, I think in any time that if you believe that you are special, you're probably not. And I think that in order to be relatively financially successful outside of the music cities, you do actually have to be special in a different way, or whatever that means. I think that's a broad enough term that I can accept using that word. I think that you do have to. There is a level. Most people are not going to be able to do that. So I do think you have to move to a major music cities to take the traditional routes. And this is recorded music. So if you want to do live sound, I think you could do that anywhere. But if you want to do music, recorded music, or work with labels and stuff, I think you do have to move to a major music city. And again, that comes from a lot of bias, but I think that my explanations, those are the variables that I'm isolating, that I see to have the most effect on people's success and incomes. And I don't like generalizing using the word success. I would say financial success, and as well as external success, meaning awards and validation, Grammys, platinum records, etc., etc. And again, there's always going to be outliers to my observation, but those are few and far between. Okay. Number 6 is a really good one. You can't make a living just mixing. I mean, come on. You can't make a music just mixing, huh? Okay, here's the thing here. I've shared this sentiment with the CEO of the podcast marketing firm, Johnny, and he says the same thing that a lot of business guys say. He says, you have a very unique skill. It's a high value skill, meaning that you're only going to get better over time, and you can only charge more over time. Not many other people can do this, especially to your level. It's going to get better over time. And I think as far as if it was purely based on skill and branding and marketing, and as we said in the last point, location had nothing to do with it, I think that would be completely exactly right. I do think you can make a music income from just mixing. I know a lot of people that are outside of California, New York, and Tennessee that make moderate amounts of income from mixing on Fiverr or Upwork or something along like online. There's a lot of downsides to competing online. I won't get into that on this episode, but yes, I think that you can definitely make a living from mixing. And I think to do that takes a lot of personal responsibility, replying to emails on time, being reliable, and then obviously the technical skills. You need to get past the point of the valley of technicality and go back up on your reconnection with emotion. I think that that's really, really important. I do think, you can make a living from just mixing. And then I think beyond just pop mixing, right, there's film and movie mixing. I think you can actually get a regular employee job and get benefits. Like you can get health insurance benefits if you do it outside of pop mixing. If you work with film, TV, and video games, you can actually get health insurance. It's crazy. And get a job in California. If it's based in California, get a 6-figure job that pays salary. If you're doing film, TV, and video game. There's also mixing off Broadway in New York or on Broadway in New York. There's mixing for live sound, which is a whole different industry that actually can pay really well. Talking head and like corporate events, podcast mixing. I know a lot of people that make a living from just podcast mixing and editing. There's so many different ways. So just be creative and try all the different things. There's not much to say about this. So that's dumb. Like, you can't make a living just mixing. That's not even a myth. That's just like not true. Obviously, there are people that do it. I'm not wasting time on that. That was like a really low-hanging fruit. Stupid ChatGPT. All right, 7. Stock plugins aren't good enough for professional mixes. I will say this again and again and again and again. If we were to have a mix-off, I will outmix anybody. I will outmix anybody with stock plugins. You give me stock plugins, I will outmix you. I will. You'll give me stock plugins in a DAW that I'm not comfortable with. It might take me more time, but I will outmix you. I will, for sure. And I think that any professional can say that, anybody that's like high level can say the same. Dave Pensato uses stock plugins all the time in his mixes. Everybody does. I don't know a single person that like refuses to use stock plugins. I don't know why. A little secret that Leslie taught me. 10 pulling out. If I'm going to pull out frequencies from a vocal specifically, like resonant frequencies, I find that the stock EQ37 from Pro Tools at the highest Q, which is 10.0 Q, and pulling out mid-range with that actually sounds better than doing it with FabFilter. I don't know why. Doing more than 2 is kind of removes the life from it, but just having 1 point even sounds great. Sounds fantastic. Sounds better than the more expensive option. Yeah, I think mastering, I think it's less about the tools, but it's more about mastering them. Tim Ferriss, again, in 4 Hour Workweek says that mastering a few key tools can often outperform the constant pursuit of new tech. Ooh, that's interesting. Can often outperform the constant pursuit of new tech, which never ends. That's cyclical. That is samsara. This idea applies directly to stock plugins. Mastering their full potential can lead to professional level mixes. Yeah, man. I think it's nice to have a wide variety of mix tools, but I think it's good to master the ones, especially if you're on Logic. Most of the stock tools on there are incredible. Yeah, I think generally less is more. That's very like Buddhist and Leslie Brathwaite of me. It's like focusing less is more is very important. And I think that is also good for like the mental health as well, like your view on yourself and on your craft. If you're over focused on technicality, I think that removes your ability to focus on the emotional transference, which is the point of music. So I think, yeah, less is more. Sound on Sound survey of professional audio engineers found that 62% regularly use stock plugins in their pro mixes, showing that success doesn't depend on the fanciest gear. That's interesting. This is such a general Sound on Sound survey. That's so general. What is a professional audio engineer? Is there like a baseline of like, to be professional, you have to make at least $60,000 a year? What does that mean? What is define professional audio engineer? And what is pro mixes? Define pro mixes. Mixes that make money. Does that mean if I charge $5 a mix, that is a pro mix, quote unquote? That's such a silly data point. I hate stuff like that. All right, number 8, the last one. Studios are always expensive to run. I think this used to be the case, and I think that people try to make studios really expensive. Like the people that are constantly governed by their own fear of missing out. Yeah, anybody that's governed by fear, yes, studios are always expensive or need to be expensive in order to do well. I find that really interesting. Those that are heavily creative and are not wavered, not persuaded by fear, those that are almost delusional, their level of creativity and their level of vision, they don't care about this sort of stuff. They don't. It's the ones that are less creative or less aligned with their desire or have less of a vision that are always controlled by fear. And I mean, if you're a Christian, fear is of the devil, right? So it's like, why would you do that? Just logically, maybe this is neurologically divergent of me, but I'm incapable of empathizing with people. Like, just take that part of your mind that is controlled by fear, look at it objectively from a third party, from a third perspective. Try to look at it objectively, like watch yourself watching this fear, and then just like recognize that you have it, and like stop letting it control you. Like, I know I'm oversimplifying it. I don't think it's bad. I think it's practical. That is a very human trait for us to have is fear. Like that is part of our human evolution. But I don't want to believe, nor do I actually believe, that people without fear don't have it by birth or genetics. Maybe that's partially true by nature, right? But I think that everybody that seemingly doesn't have much of it, or seemingly is delusional in a healthy way, I think that's. I refuse to believe that that is nature or nurture. I refuse to believe that that's nature. I want to say that that's nurture. It's something that people work on. These are very human traits that evolutionarily make sense. Everybody works on it. This is part of the human experience. You're not alone with those things, but you have to get over yourself. And I think that's really empowering to know that, like, oh, this is hard for all of us. This is like, hey, we're on the same page. Like, this is hard. All of us have a difficult time with this. That being said, don't, like, now it's your choice. Once you recognize that everybody has that, then it becomes a choice. And when you empower people with autonomy or freedom of choice, I think that's real. I think that is the most empowering thing ever. I think that is, like, so real, so true, and creates responsibility, gives the power back to the human being, back to the person, rather than the system. The system is always going to be bad, or going to be seen as bad forever. No matter what I can say, no matter how much level of influence that I have, there's always going to be externalizers that blame others and blame the system instead of pointing the blame finger inward, removing the power from the system and empowering themselves. But as someone, I'm always going to, I always believe in personal responsibility. I am anti-blaming the system, even if it is true, because in order to remove power from the system is to work on yourself. That is the only way. I'm a big proponent of that, and I don't know why, but creatives are especially, music and creatives are especially vulnerable to being controlled by fear, to blaming the system, and the system has a bad rap. And, like, being a part of the system, I could tell you right now, it's the bottom feeders that are making us look bad. It is not the ones that are actually doing well. It's the ones that have been removed from grace, like have been disgraced, that were at the top but then were removed because they did something awful, and then they blame the system. Or it's the people that have never been in the system. It's never people that are currently doing well in the system that are like, the system is bad. Like, nah, like the people on a personal level, like, yeah, sure, on a large scale level, Taylor Swift can blame the government. But I'm talking, like, on a personal level. Like, is Taylor Swift going to say that the producers that she works with and had a good time with, they were bad people that are parasitic and were trying to take advantage of her? No. It's yeah, no, that's not true. It's at a personal level, I don't know anybody that's, like, super parasitic like that and evil like that. No, the higher up the ladder I go, the less parasitic and less evil people are, the more passionate and sincere and friendly and aware of the need of validation everybody has, and plays into that in a healthy way. Our better conversationalists are better with reliability and maintaining communication, are better with helping people believe in themselves, empowering those around them, are better with connecting. I don't know how. It's to the point where I don't understand. I kind of understand, but to a certain degree, I don't understand how people can be so controlled by, I don't know. All right. That was number 8. Studios are all expensive to run. Obviously not. You can do your own studio. I'm in my home studio too. I've actually never made more money before I started moving to home studio. In a business sense, overhead is usually what kills new companies. Overhead, if you have high overhead, high rent, it's so easily something that kills new companies. And time again, by all the major business influencers as well, is like, you need, before you start investing in new gear and new avenues for growth and expansion, you need to get the efficiency and get your shit down with what you have. Like, if you can't become efficient or get it down with what you have, there's no point to expanding to new tools and trying different avenues. Don't upgrade or invest if you aren't already efficient with what you already have, is my point. And that's coming from a business perspective, not coming from a creative perspective, which, by the way, is important, because if you're doing music as a hobby and you're aware of that, I think like you should spend money into it and do whatever the heck you want with it, even if it is not efficient, because your focus should be fun. Right. And I think that's very valid. But if your focus is building a business and building a career, which is a major point of this podcast, right? Then you do need to worry about overhead, how much things cost, becoming efficient with the tools that you already have. Plain and simple. It does not cost a lot of money anymore you can do it on a phone. You can do it on a phone. You can speed run a Drake beat. There's kids on Twitch speed running Drake beats in 30 seconds. Which my takeaway is that creativity is dead over in that sector, but that's not important. Nobody cares about my opinion, actually. Actually, that's objectively not true. People do care. Some very, very few, minor amount of people care about my opinion. Thus, you're probably at this point of the podcast. Okay, let's see. Gary Vee preaches lean operations, arguing that the less overhead you have, the more agile and profitable your business can become. Vaynerchuk encourages creatives to focus on scaling down unnecessary expenses while maximizing output. Of course, that's like not even business 101. That's like business elementary. According to the RIAA, Recording Industry Association of America, home studios now account for 45% of professional album production. Professional album production, throwing that cost-effective studios are viable and increasingly common. Yeah, again, I think the biggest component to that is like PR and fear. Like people want, and it's also like connection too. Like I do think it's valid for people to pay for more expensive studio times, because the connection to know the studio owner, to know the producers that work at that level may be worth the money. It's not even about the end product. It's about the connection. So like as an artist or a producer, if you can pay $10,000 for an album for one mixer, and this is coming from me, which is like, I don't want to share too much, versus if you're comfortable with the idea of hiring like 10 mixers at $1,000 each, I would work with the 10 mixers for $1,000 each. And then that's good for two reasons. This one for connection and getting more people to believe in your product and to be aware of your product, to personally endorse your product. And then number two is also then you can find out that out of the 10, DK was the best mixer, and you can have objective comparison. I think, and then hire DK to do all of your songs for the rest of them. I think that's really good. I will do shootouts any day because I know I win. I win most of them. I did an exclusive episode about that, of how to win mix shootouts, and I gave some of my secrets for $4 a month. For $4 a month, you can sign up and get access to over 200 episodes of exclusive content, and one of those exclusive contents is how to win mix shootouts, how to get into mix shootouts, how to hold your place in the industry, and why that should excite you. There's an episode about that. Go to mixingmusicpodcast.com/exclusive to get access to those episodes, which, by the way, is hosted by Spotify. So if you are a Spotify listener, then it's native to the platform. You can see what episodes you're missing. But if you're on Apple, you still subscribe via the link in Spotify, but you get an external RSS feed, which you can import into Apple as a separate show. So then there'll be 2 Mixing Music podcast shows. So you can use it in whatever platform that you do, but you be aware that you do have to subscribe through Spotify, which is the hosting platform of the exclusive episodes. All right, and that's it for this episode. Those are the myths, breaking it down. I think we had a lot of great conversations. I thought this was going to be a 20-minute episodes, but I underestimated my ability to rant and ramble and speak lightly on the nuance. I think I'm very proud, and I really do think I have a lot of pride. Partially from echo chamber, from my emphasis. I think it's like very obvious that I have a lot of personal bias for personal empowerment, for personal autonomy, for removing power from the system to personal through accepting responsibility, through average amount of efforts over above average amount of times. I have a huge personal bias and belief of being consistent with your communication, even if you don't want to. Respond to your emails, respond to texts, pick up quickly to clients that you don't want to pick up the phone for, like pick them up quickly. You're going to have to do it regardless. If you agree to finish a project but you don't really want to work with them, you can drag your feet and show them that you're not invested in the product, or finish strong and at least pretend, at the very least, pretend that you enjoy that, because then you don't have to deal with the drama. You just finish the project. It'll get done faster. Don't drag your feet, and then they'll love you more. And then that's where word of mouth starts, is if the client that you may not have liked working with has a good experience with you, then they share that they had a good experience with you with somebody else, and that spreads like wildfire, honestly. And going back to the idea that nepotism is very practical within the music industry because of the subjective nature of the craft. Getting people to talk about you through having a great experience with you where you over-delivered. And that is, again, not just through the mix itself or the producing itself or the record, whatever process you're doing, but also through the communication and execution and the emotional intelligence stuff, validating their efforts and working with them, helping artists and clients work through their emotions. I mean, Rick Rubin is famous for that. It's like he's hugely de-emphasis on the craft of production and knowing your chords and shit. And he is just very much, he's just like a therapist inside the studio. And that's how he makes tons of money and has tons of success. Like, he is like very open that it's not technical musical skill. It's just emotional intelligence purely. That goes a long way. So reply to your emails, empower yourself. You have every right to blame the system, to blame your upbringing, to blame bigotry. You have every right, and humanity will validate those. Humanity and your neighbors and those that love and care about you will validate your excuses. And that's the reason why it's so fucking dangerous, is because the ones that really love you and care for you will recognize the pain that you have and will validate your experience. It has to be your choice to remove that power from the system, from the people that you feel like are against you. Blame yourself and move forward. That is so important. So important. The people that love you may not help you unless you have an asshole friend like me who tells it to you straight. I'm a lot of people's asshole friend, where I am incapable. I am like, it is just not, something in my brain was not wired correctly. I am kind. And I am getting better at knowing when not to say anything, and recognizing when it's not a moment to teach versus when is a moment to teach. I think that's very valuable of a skill. That being said, if you're being an asshole, if you're being weird, I will tell you straight up without fear. And I think a lot of people love me for that. And I think a lot of people need that. So don't be overly sensitive with yourself. Don't take yourself too seriously. Have fun like a child. This is play for us. We're very blessed to be able to do this. We're very, very, very blessed to be able to do this. So, just enjoy. Like, seriously amazing work comes from serious dedication to play. I really do believe that. All right. On that note, happy mixing, my friends, and stay saucy. What up, people live on the stream? Sorry I wasn't contributing to your conversation, but now that I'm done recording, I can kind of read these. Audio's kind of getting in and out. I did fix that, I think. Hey, D tuning in from Cape Town, South Africa. Nice. How was your run? Hope all went well. Run was great. Yeah, just came in time. Like, literally 5 minutes before the cutoff time. 50 miles in 13 hours and 54 minutes or something like that. Hey, DK, just got to the studio, had a sip of coffee, set up an engineering room, and hopped on your live. Your stuff is really inspiring and motivating. I'm glad. That's the thing. That's the thing. More than like inspiring and motivating is I hope that it kind of like brings in a new perspective where it's like motivate. I don't know. This is semantics here, but like motivation is very fleeting. Like, it comes to you. But I think like clearing your conscience and aligning your desires and knowing what you want and accepting yourself and accepting your desires, I think it's not motivating. It becomes automatic. I don't think you need motivation to do those things, but I'm really glad. But I think that's, regardless of the nuance there, I really appreciate that. I really do hope that I am motivating and I inspire people to do more. In that sense, like in classic capitalism fashion, capitalist fashion, I really do and believe and encourage more competition. The cocky part of me is like, because you're gonna prove how good I am because I'm the fucking GOAT, and with more competition, the more contrast that you're gonna create to show, the more value people are giving me, the more value I can showcase. But on a more happy and pleasing note, I think that competition drives more creative endeavors, more risks within the creative industry, and I think that it drives higher skill and raises the bar. I also like how accessible audio and music is these days. I think that's really, really important, actually, because the more people learn about the importance of mixing and mastering, that means the more people learn about the significance of my job, which at the end of the day means more lifetime earnings, more people understanding how important my job really is. There's so many people that are aware of what mixing and mastering is now than there was like a decade or two ago. And I'm sure that my income, and not just in the current moment, but lifetime earnings, has been dramatically affected by this attention that has come to mixing and mastering via accessibility. Yeah, I'm huge on this. So let's see what else. Oh, I did something that I haven't done in 2 elections. I didn't really vote last election, but I did vote this election. I voted 2 elections ago, and the one before that. Oh, it's just last election that I didn't vote for. Interesting. Yeah. So go out and vote. Very interesting. With the election, there's like not just, there's like in LA, there's like city stuff, county stuff, state stuff along, like the voting for president is just like one, but there's a ton of sections. And me and my wife, we were like looking at these bills and these amendments, and things were like, we didn't even know these were up for debate. And we were like, we spent hours looking into these county, city, state level stuff. And it was fun to have real deep conversations with our values and what we find important between me and my wife. That was really fun. My wife is Japanese, as in she has an accent that is her first language. She grew up in Japan, but because she was born in Hawaii before moving to Japan when she was in before preschool, I think even, she is technically a natural born American citizen, and I am not, because I was born in Japan, so I can never run for president. I am an American citizen now, but but I cannot run for president. Not natural born. Let's see if Lou is ready. I want to do another episode with him. Let's see. Yeah, it looks like Lou is awake. He missed his alarm. But we have a weekly schedule. 9:30 we record every Monday. 9:30 we record the podcast. How's everybody else doing? Anybody else on the stream? It looks like there's a couple of you out there. I haven't been streaming at all. I just decided to stream for this episode because it's just me. When it's me and Lou, we have to record via third-party website, and I'm not able. My current systems do not allow me to stream those. It's very difficult to stream that. I'm sure that I can work around it, but my level of laziness is higher than my desire to live stream when me and Lou. That being said, I probably want to pee. I'm going to pee before Lou gets on. If you have any questions, if you're watching right now, and if you want me to talk about something, riff on something for a while, or answer a question about music or mixing, anything, whether it's technical or philosophical, I'm more than happy to do that. Ask those questions in the chat right now, or topics that you want me to riff on for a little bit while I pee? I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. All right. I think I'm gonna record an episode with Lou. Back to y'all. Kaiser Soze says, talk about getting into engineering after 30, being a beginner. Age. Oh, you're talking about like age. Let me ask, are you talking about as a career or like just for personal fulfillment? What does that mean? How do you mean by that? What do you mean getting into engineering? Is that like just as a skill, like knowing how to engineer, or does that mean like career wise? In what context? Waiting for your response before I can share that. All right, hold on one second. Learning enough to be able to start a career. Yeah, so I think the good news is that there's never been a better time for public education, public information. This is the most accessible time period in the history of music audio engineering, that this information is so accessible. Like there was literally gatekeeping back in the day, like actual gatekeeping, where with any sort of like, this is the same thing with like the reason why there is stonemasonry is like to kind of keep the secret of stonemasonry a secret from the public, so only those that are part of the guild can monetize stone craftsmanship, working with stone, right? So there used to be this practical gatekeeping in order to protect those that are doing it as a career, just like that. That's not the case anymore, not at all. So one, I think, is recognizing how much information that you have, and that you're recognizing how lucky you are to live in this golden age of education and free information. And starting with that, like remove all FOMO about that. Just know. I think that it's gonna come. Well, it depends. If there's so many different options and so many paths that you could take. One path that you could take, and this is the path that I took, is you could start learning, and if you have a band or if you have a friend group where someone likes to make music, and then working with them for free or for very low cost, probably free to be honest, if you're just starting, probably free. And if you really love the craft, for at this moment in time, just focus on getting better. Just focus on getting better. That's it. It's like, use the DAW that you're not comfortable with. Use the DAW that you want to use, that you're willing to commit to for the rest of the career. And start Googling things of how to do things. Like, try to stay creative. And then, like, if you don't know how this works in Pro Tools or whatever DAW that you're using, like, Google that, figure that out. Work with your friends. Find someone online if you don't have any friends. And just start doing things for free. I will say that the one difficult thing about being older isn't actually the age that you're starting at. It's more that there's significantly more people when you're 20 in college that are starting at ground zero just like you. When you're 30, people are not starting at ground zero. They've either been doing it a lot and are not willing to work with you for free because they're used to paying more or wanting a higher quality product. So that's the only thing with being older, is that it's significantly difficult to find someone that is at your level. But when you're 20, everybody's at the ground level, so it's very easy to find someone to collaborate with or do free work with. Everybody's trying to fight for it. So be aware of that. That being said, like, I'm sure that you can find someone online in person to start working for free, doing it on your own. The second path is you're going to have to do that anyway, and you should continue to do that first path consistently regardless of what else you do. But the second path that you can do additionally to this, and this works best in LA or music cities, but doesn't have to be. I did this. You could do this. A lot of people did this in fucking Provo, Utah, right? Or Michigan or North Dakota. There's always musicians and studios around. And it might be easier to do. It might be easier to get into outside of music cities, but to intern, start working for a professional. The problem with this when you're older is that typically when you're older, you may be married, you may have kids, you may have personal responsibilities, school debt that's chasing after you, whatever. You do not have the time and the financial flexibility to like donate an intern, or at the very least run for a minimum wage. Like, you're less flexible with that. But if you do have the time for that, and if you are flexible with that, or you can do that in your spare time, even if it's only a few hours a week, I think that that's really valuable. Mostly for the connections that you make. The skills will still have to come from your personal adventuring and experiments and experience. But I do think having a connection to those things and being around those that do that professionally, that have already figured out systems, I think seeing other people's systems and relying on other people's systems until you create your own are very, very helpful. Very helpful. Right. I'd like to eventually be able to charge for recording and mixing, possibly in my own studio or offering online services. Yeah, there you go. If you're in a non-music city, I think having your own studio and being like the one-stop shop, like recording, mixing, producing, mastering, whatever, doing everything on your own is practical and is actually useful for these smaller markets, music markets. I don't think that's, I don't know many people in LA that do everything consistently. Like, they have a one-stop shop. Like, out here, the budgets are higher. There's a higher demand. The supply and demand is significantly different out here. It's unfathomable from a small non-music city place. And so that's why people niche and specialize into different things. And that's objectively more lucrative than being the one-stop shop. But if you're like in Montana or outside of LA, Atlanta, Tennessee, New York, then I think being a one-stop shop is great. Offering your services online is great. If you're in LA, I don't know if offering your services online is super reliable, because you have LA expenses, but online competition is just not worth it. Like, people are doing $5 to $25 mixes, and that's just not feasible. So what you're doing is you're actually, if you feel pressured, if you're in LA and you have a brand to upkeep and you feel pressured to lower your prices online, the prices that are visible and public to everybody, if you feel pressured to lower them in order to compete with the online community who are not paying LA expenses, then all that does is dilutes your brand, and it shows a lack of confidence in your ability by lowering your prices. So I don't think that that's the case. But if you're doing it online, the scary thing with online, and this is something that you should be aware about as well, is that people are not just paying for your technical skill. Online, people will be paying for you because of your price and your technical skill. But in the real world, those that are charging significantly more, people are not competing on price. People aren't hiring me because I'm cheaper than someone else. People are hiring me in LA because I'm DK and I've created a brand for myself. So as you offer your services online, which there's going to be if you offer it on like Fiverr, for example, there's not going to be an emphasis. That's not going to really be a great place for PR of building a personal brand, right? It's going to be diluted by the branding of Fiverr. But if you can figure out a way to get people to your website or meet people in person where it is about you, where you do have a chance to prove your personal brand, that at the end of the day scales and is more lucrative financially over the long term than continue to build online. But building online is accessible, it's open-ended, it is scalable, but with things that are scalable comes competition. And so you just be aware of how the industry moves in the online space versus the in-person space. Hopefully that answers your question. There's very few like practical advice that we could give for this because so many different people have gotten there with so many different reasons. Being 30, being older, I'm 31. Like being 30, I don't think should be. I think the two things that I talked about that are difficult are valid, but other than that, I don't think that should stop you. If anything, like it's awesome that most people don't even find out what they want to do. And the fact that you found it, even if it is a little bit later, is great. Oh, dude, if you're in New York City, then yeah, I would go do your own thing, obviously. And if you're in New York City, you're going to have a very easy time finding someone that is at the ground level with you, that is willing to work with you. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's amazing. Okay, sweet. And yeah, you're going to find an easy time finding someone to learn from and to borrow systems from and build connections with. Yeah. That's good. That's great that you're in New York City. My advice and feelings change a lot based on where your location is. And with that last episode that we just recorded, where one myth of the audio industry is that you have to be in a major music city, and that's the one that I disagreed with. I do think being in a major music city helps a ton for the traditional routes. Yes, and I am biased. Doesn't this look like this? I'm missing the ball end of the lever that goes into the mic stand. And just like fell off. I guess the glue got loose or something like that. That's so annoying that happened. Whatever. All right, has Lou responded yet? I guess not. All right. If there's any other questions, I think I might not do a second episode. I might just upload this one for tomorrow. Because it's already noon in LA. Is there any other questions or things that people want me to riff on, talk about, any topics that you want me to talk about from my perspective, or questions that you may have, or things that you want me to help you think through? I'm really good at helping. I have a lot of confidence in my ability to process and think through things. Yeah, I try my very best to generalize and have practical solutions when I think that believing in those practical solutions, whether or not it is a placebo, is actually good for you, versus like when thinking overgeneralizing and having a practical solution is not good for you. I feel like I'm really good at being able to determine when is the right time to naively believe in something and when is the right time to not do so. So anything, any processing, any questions, anything you want me to riff on, let me know. Otherwise, I'm probably going to sign off in about 2 minutes. It's been a while since we've done a live stream, so thanks for everybody that's joined in so far. All right, let's see here. In news, y'all want to hear some news, I guess? I am Very close. I am months away. Oops. Oops. I messed up. Oops. I sent out an invoice to the wrong. Oops. Oops. I need to correct an invoice. All right. If that's it, let's see. Other personal information. We talked about voting. We talked about the importance of figuring out your values. That was cool. I'm only saying this because there's only a few people online, but as far as voting goes, I'm very moderate, and I switch sides from the last time I voted. I'm not going to say to which side, from which side to which side, but I am one of the few people that are not forever one way or the other. Yeah, I voted blue and I voted left. And that I am actually a little bit more one direction for local, city, county, and state politics, and I'm the other way for federal. I know nobody cares about that, but yeah. All right, I think I'm gonna sign off. Thank you everybody much for joining. Appreciate y'all. Have a great week. Stay blessed. Stay happy.